Welcome to Megabucks Radio. Conversations with successful entrepreneurs, sharing their tips and strategies for success. Real-world ideas that can put megabucks in your bank account. Here's your host, Nina Hirschberger.
Well, hello today. This is Nina Hirschberger, and I am honored to have on the show today Rob Thomson. Rob is an estate planning attorney. And Rob, the little background, we're going to talk about insurance, which may not be what you would think about with an estate planning attorney, but actually it's pretty important. And in fact, you had some background in the insurance industry before you got into the law. So first of all, welcome to today's show. And let's get started. Tell me a little bit about your background in the insurance world before we get started.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Nina. And so my first job out of undergraduate was as a life insurance underwriter for a major national carrier. And so I sort of developed a fascination with life insurance, financial planning, and estate planning. And that was ultimately one of the things that drove me to become an estate planning attorney many years later. So, I see it every day in my practice. Families come in and they're doing their estate plan, and they either don't have any life insurance, or they don't have enough, or maybe they don't have the right kind. And I've also seen it play out in probate court, where there would be a situation where a family could have avoided a lot of drama and heartache if they just had some coverage in place. So that sort of pushed me toward this journey that I'm on now.
Okay, so you opened up your practice after getting out of school and stuff, and you began to see that pattern. Because estate planning isn't just, give me a definition of what your definition of estate planning would be.
Sure. So a good definition of estate planning might be that if I'm the client, I want to give what I have to whom I want, when I want, the way I want, and I want to avoid, legal fees and court costs and taxes to the extent that that's, legal, moral, and ethical.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, if I look over in my office right here, I can pull out our estate planning portfolio that we had done a number of years ago. And I think one of the things that makes you a lot different, Rob, is never once did that lawyer talk anything about insurance. Never knew if we had it, never knew nothing. There was no discussion at all about any kind of insurance. We own our own business, so whether it's liability insurance, whether it's life insurance, there was no discussion. So I think the fact that you've added some of that to your practice is a bit unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's not really a part of my practice so much as it's a separate business operating under a separate entity. But I try to keep the two separate because I don't want to have a conflict of interest when I'm advising my clients. So I try not to, sell my estate planning clients an insurance product or what have you. But if they don't have it, I'll tell them what my recommendations are. And if they, maybe they'll get it somewhere else. And if not, then I make the requisite disclosures and we can help them out with that. But insurance solves so many estate planning problems. And most estate planning attorneys don't see it because they just don't have the background for it. They view life insurance sales like, a lot of other people do. A lot of people have had a bad experience with a sales process or a salesperson, and it's left a bad taste in their mouth. And that's another one of the factors that has sort of pushed me to do what I'm doing now, is to sort of reverse engineer that and fix it so that we don't have this gap between, hundreds of thousands of families that don't have the right coverage or don't have any coverage, and the pain of going through that process because you got to deal with someone that you don't know whether you can trust or not. And you may end up with something that isn't really appropriate for your family. And so you really don't know until you have to use it, whether it's good or not.
Okay, so I mean that makes perfect sense. So how would I know if something is good or not? I mean, I've got an insurance agent. Because are you talking primarily with life insurance? Is that what your separate entity works with?
Yes, primarily life insurance, and we also can help our clients with disability insurance and long-term care insurance. So, how would you know if you've got the right thing, if you've got the right insurance product? Well, it starts with education, and so I had sort of a eureka moment in my kitchen with my wife, and she mentioned that she wasn't sleeping very well, and I asked her why not, and she told me that she had been worrying about what would happen to our family if something happened to me as the primary breadwinner. And so I after I comforted her and said, babe, we got life insurance, we'll be fine. It hit me that she's probably not the only spouse out there that's having those worries, that worries about that and stays awake at night, and loses sleep over it. And a lot of those families probably don't know where to start. They probably know they need something, but they don't know, how do I figure out what type of insurance to buy? How do I figure out how much we need? And how do I know who to trust to sell it to me and not give me a raw deal? So I sort of took that problem and wrote a book about it, a little ebook. It's really more like a pamphlet. It's about 20 pages, and it just explains, this is what you need to know if you want to find an insurance agent that you can trust. And there are really three things. You want to find someone who has a track record of success. They've got experience in the industry, and they have access to a lot of carriers, because a lot of times insurance agents, they can only represent one carrier, or that carrier has to decline to, the coverage. They have to deny the insured before that agent can sell another policy. That's just how the contract is written. So, so I want to make sure that people understand that they need to work with an agent that has the ability to sell policies from any number of carriers and not just the one. And then, also in that pamphlet, I talk about how to choose what type of insurance you need, because there are lots of different types. And primarily, I'm talking about term versus permanent. What are the differences? What are some use cases where one might be better than the other? And then, how to decide how much to buy. And I go through a calculation, and it's, everything really starts with education. And once the consumer has the requisite knowledge, once they know how to go about selecting an agent and know what to buy and how much, then they can have confidence, and they can, at that point, they can tell whether the agent that they're working with kind of has their best interests at heart or not.
That's interesting. So let's go back to what is the average age of somebody that comes into your practice and wants an estate plan?
Well, it's all over the board, really. I get young families, and I get folks who are retired and the kids are grown, and they're redoing their estate plan maybe for the third or the fourth time. So every family that has a reason to protect and someone that they love can use estate planning.
Yeah, because the reason I ask that question is, so often in our mind, at least in my mind, and obviously it's not inaccurate, is I think of estate planning as being somebody who might be in their 50s, late 50s, and now they finally think, they need a plan in. But you're saying young people. And so
That's
insuring and having disability insurance and all that would be very critical.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, young families come in because, especially when, they've got a major life event, like, a child, they have a baby, their first child, then they start to think about these things. Or if they buy a house and they're thinking about this sort of thing. And so those are kind of triggers for people to think about, when is a good time to start doing your estate plan. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it's, and then, retirement is another trigger. And when the kids go off to college, and, there are many, many different times when people think about making changes to their plan. But I think I kind of lost track of your question. Sorry about that.
Okay. No, I'm interested in how it was, early on, because in my mind, I always think of estate planning as somebody who's a little further along in the journey of life.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that you talked about, knowing about how to choose an insurance agent, is their success track record, you said. What does that mean?
Well, it means that they've been in the industry for a long time, and particularly in the life insurance industry, the turnover for agents is about 90% annually, which means that only about 10% of the agents that start this year will be in the industry next year. And what that means for consumers is that if you buy a life insurance policy from somebody who's brand new in the industry, chances are they're not going to be around next year when you have a question about your policy. So it's important to choose an agent that has been in the industry and has demonstrated staying power. And they have staying power because they know what they're doing. They understand people's needs, and they understand how to meet those needs. And you can extrapolate a lot of information from that.
Long-term care insurance. I know that. I think that is getting harder and harder to get, and more and more expensive. Talk to me a little bit about that.
That's right. So, probably 10 or 15 years ago, or whenever it was that companies started really marketing long-term care insurance very hard, there were a lot of companies that offered it, but it became very expensive. And because people began living longer and not necessarily living healthier, so they were making a lot of claims, and insurance companies had a bad experience with it, so a lot of them dropped the product altogether. There are only a few carriers that still offer it, and it is fairly expensive, especially if you wait until you're 50 or over to get it. But there are some alternative solutions that are available. That are sort of tied in with life insurance. There are life insurance policies that have a critical care rider or something like that. They're all structured differently. There are several different options for that. But it's possible to have a life insurance policy that will cover long-term care for a much, much lower cost than a traditional long-term care insurance policy. Now, either one or the other of those might make sense in a particular case. It just really depends on what the agent and the client decide together.
Okay. So you start your legal practice. You start with estate planning. You see that there's this gap, there's this hole, there's this really issue that they could be facing in the future, and you know that insurance will help take care of it. But you're an attorney. You're not a licensed insurance agent, and you want to keep all of that separate. So you decided to start a separate business, separate entity, totally separate. You do talk about it with your customers, your clients, and with full disclosure, but you hand them over. So tell me, you must have developed a team of people over in that entity, in that side business, with all this experience and everything you're talking about.
Right. So after I wrote that little primer, I realized that there really aren't very many agencies, if any, that are approaching this problem the way that I suggest that it should be solved. And so I called a friend of mine that I know is in the insurance industry, who's been in the industry for probably 40 years now, and asked him if he thought it was a good idea. If there was a way that we could do this, we could recruit, the dream team of insurance professionals and solve this problem for folks to get them exactly what I've recommended. And he said, "Yeah, that's a great idea. I don't know why we didn't think of this sooner." So we put it together. It's called Insight for Life, Inc. And we've got a stable of agents that have a minimum of about 15 years of insurance industry experience. Some of them have, as I mentioned, 40 plus years in the industry, and they all have a track record of success, and they all have access to 40 plus carriers, and are not beholden to any of them. So I feel like we are on our way to solving the problem that I articulated. So I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, in the insurance world, there's two things. One is called an independent agent, and the other is a captive agent. So if you're a State Farm and Allstate, those are what's known as captive agents, and they do what you said a few minutes ago, is they write policies for that home office or that agent or that company. But an independent agent you have got 40 carriers. That's a lot in the industry. So that means you can, or not you because you're not doing it, but the stable of agents that you've developed and put into the other entity, they can then look to see what's the most beneficial for the client. Am I getting that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Now, I mean, because they're insurance agents, we can't say that they owe the client a fiduciary duty in the way that an attorney has a fiduciary duty to the client. But we've gotten as close as we can get, given the regulatory environment. So, and that's really what I wanted to replicate: is how do we do what's in the client's interest? And we can't say that we're fiduciaries. We can't say that because the agents are earning a commission. But they're positioned the best that they can be for any agents in the industry to act in the interest of the clients.
Well, yeah, anybody in business, we know they got to make money. I don't care what business. I don't care if you're a shoe salesperson. We all understand you got to make money. But the beauty about being from a consumer standpoint, at least this is just my view, I would love it if my insurance agent did have that many and had that experience and wasn't just wet behind the ears and just, finished their certification. I mean, there would be a trust level. Absolutely.
Right. And that's what we're hoping, that consumers will think like you do on this, and hopefully they'll give us a shot.
Okay. So what's the flip side? Why would I not use a service like that?
I don't know. I can't think of a good reason not to.
Okay, so obviously, when you're going through the estate plan and you see that perhaps the husband, let's say the husband, is the major breadwinner, the wife is stay at home with the two children and their ages 6 and 8 or whatever, and so that there's a real issue if he becomes disabled, which happens, or if something else happens, God forbid. There is nothing then. It doesn't matter how well the estate has been planned. There's nothing going forward.
That's right.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. All right.
So in the little pamphlet that I wrote, I tell a story that sort of bears that out, and it's a story that I borrowed from a book by a friend of mine named Matt Monroe, and the book is called "You Need More Money." I hope it's okay for me to mention that. But he tells the story of a relative of his who had a diagnosis of late stage cancer, and they didn't have any insurance and they didn't have any savings, and the family would have been destitute if it hadn't been for the kindness of others. But what could have prevented them having to rely on the kindness of others is the right insurance, in place in the right amounts. So that's the problem that I'm trying to prevent for as many families as we can.
Yeah, I mean, every single one of us has homeowners insurance and car insurance and, this and that kind of insurance, and you never want to use it. I mean, you never want to, but you can't be without it. But so many times we do avoid or don't think about or think we can't afford disability or life insurance, when in fact that could cause more issues than any other one. If you're in that car accident and you become disabled, or like you say, a late stage cancer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. Well, Rob, do you have another story? Tell me. I love stories. So do you have anybody else that you think about?
Well, I have lots of stories, but I suppose I could tell my own story. Right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm in Kuwait with the National Guard unit, and another reason I want to make sure that I've got the right kind of insurance and the right amounts in place to protect my family in case anything happens to me while I'm here. So it's not just occupational hazard. On the day-to-day, maybe I'll have an accident in traffic or something, God forbid. But sometimes I face real danger, and I want to make sure my family is protected, taken care of.
Well, first of all, you just shocked me. First of all, let me say thank you. We don't say thank you enough to somebody like you who's, protecting our freedom. So what is an attorney doing over in Kuwait? What? Obviously only what you can tell me, but are you doing legal work somehow over there? Or are you actually?
I am. Yeah. So the Army has the largest law firm in the world, and it's called the JAG Corps. And we do all sorts of different kinds of interesting areas of law. It's very fascinating and very exciting. But I'm looking forward to coming home. So.
Yeah, well, I bet you are. Well, and those of you who are listening to this, we did pre-record this, and Rob, you probably heard his voice. There was a little bit of catching in the voice, and now it makes sense why. The cell service probably over in Kuwait is a little different than what it is here. Rob, I'm looking at the time. We're wrapping up this show. If somebody's really interested in not only estate planning, but interested in possibly talking to one of your agents as far as life and disability, do you have a special offer? Do you want them to go someplace?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to get them a copy of the ebook. We'll offer that complimentary. We don't sell it; we give it away. They can contact me at for that at rob@myinsight4life.com. That's my email. They can also call Gary Smith, who is my vice president of insurance operations, and talk directly to him. And he sort of runs the show. And Gary's number is 281-269-2372.
Rob, I know you're near Houston. Do you guys service all 50 states, or do you have to be in Texas, or what's?
We do have agents who are licensed in just about every state. So yes, we can service pretty much anyone in the continental U.S.
Okay, terrific. Well, that's a wrap. And I want to say thank you to Rob again for joining us from Kuwait. And if you've listened to this show and you haven't done any kind of analysis about disability insurance and life insurance, I'm going to give Gary's number one more time. It is 281-269-2372. And they pretty well have agents in any of the states, so they're happy, I'm sure, to chat with you and your particular situation. So, Rob, stay safe. Thank you for being on today's call.
Thank you, Nina. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for listening to Megabucks Radio with Nina Hirschberger. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or to listen to past episodes, visit megabucksradio.com.